is it? Hi, everybody. What day is it? It is Wednesday.
December 9th. Can you?
You know, I don't know about you, but I feel like it's Groundhog's Day every day. And I haven't done an Instagram Live for a little while, so we thought we'd have a little conversation with my friend, Andrew Ross Sorkin of there he is, Sorkins. You probably know Andrew from the New York Times, from CNBC. Not only is he a fantastic financial journalist, but he happens to be a really nice person. Hi, Andrew.
Hey, how are you?
How do you like that intro?
I love that intro.
I'm turning comments only because they'll cover your cute your Shayna Putnam.
Well, how are you? Tell me, I haven't seen you. I mean, I see you on Instagram now all the time, and
Yeah.
email every morning.
I know.
I haven't gotten to person.
Let me ask you about that background. That's beautiful.
So this is. I'll show you what's going on. So I do the show now, Squawk Box, every morning from home,
Which is awesome.
which is crazy. But there's a massive, massive monitor behind me with lights and all this. You can see the stuff everywhere. So I've taken up my home office, which used to be a beautiful room here with the couches and all sorts of great stuff.
Yeah.
Sort of ruined.
Well, it looks beautiful. Can I tell you? I feel like your apartment, like you have the nicest view of New York from your apartment.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I used to always think when we would do live shots with guests and they were like, in Denver, it was always beautiful behind them. I thought, oh, wow, it's amazing. And now I realize the magic.
Oh, sorry. We're having trouble. Sorry. My phone isn't charged, and so it keeps, we're trying to charge it, but then it will.
And I was thinking about this before we got on together, because the charge on the bottom, you can't really, it's a problem.
I know. So hopefully I won't run out of juice while we're talking. So Andrew, first of all, it's great to see you. How are you? How are you and your family doing? You've got these little kids. How are you guys coping?
It depends on the day. Some days badly, some days well. We're healthy. Everybody's great. My kids are going to school full time still. Everybody wears a mask in school. Science experiment. They're tested once a week. We've been in the city now since they came back to school. We were up in Connecticut for a good portion of last spring, but it's work. I never thought. I'm sure you've had other guests on your Instagram Live, because I watched them say this before. I'm surprised at how well. I know you're not supposed to say that. How well it's actually worked, or better. It's worked better than I ever thought it would.
Yeah.
But like you, I imagine I miss seeing people and hugging people and all of that. We just had the cable guy in the house to make sure the cable was working, and he had his mask on. I put my N95 mask on. I started opening up windows thinking, oh my God. And then I didn't want the kids to go in the room because, I get into this whole crazy thing like, well, the cable guy's probably been in 100 people's houses today. So that's like a vector, and it becomes, a problem.
It is quite amazing when you think about the fact that it's almost been a year. If you think about sort of the beginning, early March, and the fact that we're now in basically the middle of December about. So it's been crazy, but
But I worry about you.
Huh?
Worry not to be the half glass empty person. I worry we could be doing this conversation next year too.
Really?
I hope not, but I'm a little bit nervous that I'm very hopeful, obviously, about the vaccines. I just don't know if they're going to come nearly as quickly. And I think if you read that article in the New York Times yesterday, even once you get the vaccine, until you get the community to take it to the point of about 75% taking it, and I had a conversation with Fauci about this where he said 75%, unless 75%, you will be still wearing a mask and you will still be social distancing. So even if we get our vaccine, I don't know if we're going to get to hug. I hope we can.
Well, I think there needs to be a huge public health awareness campaign. I think there are a lot of people who feel nervous, uncomfortable about the vaccine. I talked to a Black doctor who's heading up a consortium of Black doctors to reach out to primarily, the Black and brown community, but because of such a history historically, and it's going to be a big bridge to cross. But I hope that they're doing a lot of outreach. But you're right. Who knows what's going to happen? And
Can I try something? Can I,
that,
can I try an idea out on you? And
yeah.
I'm thinking about this as a column because I cover the world of business. How do you feel about businesses mandating vaccination for employees and in certain cases customers? So for example, if Delta Airlines decided that you could not get on an airplane without having a quote unquote vaccine passport, that could potentially be a competitive advantage. I would get on that plane before I'd get on the other plane.
Yeah.
It would also be a forcing mechanism for a lot of people to get the vaccine. If employers around the country, if Amazon said every worker in their warehouse, every worker in their warehouse now has to get tested. If they said every worker in their warehouse has to take the vaccine, which may be a different issue. Getting a shot and getting a test are different. I don't want to belittle, but you could really get some real rapid uptake if you force the issue. If you force the issue, you could also have a massive backlash.
I was going to say, wouldn't that just open the floodgates to countless lawsuits against these companies who,
Well,
you know, religious reasons, for, ethical reasons, for a whole host of reasons.
I didn't know this before I started looking into it. Private businesses can require all sorts of vaccinations. Schools, even public school systems, can require all sorts of vaccinations. If you work at a hospital, they can require prison guards. There's lots of industries and lots of court rulings that suggest that so long as the FDA has approved some kind of vaccine, from a private perspective, and even a public employee, like if the state of New York said every public employee has to take the vaccine, otherwise you can't go to work and you can't be an employee here, you could do that. By the way, there would be lots of people screaming about it, I imagine, but you could do it. And I do wonder, given the number of other people who will have taken it by the time April, May, June rolls around, whether once you've seen 30, 40, 50 million people take it around the world, hopefully successfully, whether you would still get that backlash. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there was a piece I read this morning about, in Great Britain, two people having allergic reactions to the vaccine, which I thought, oh God, this is going to really create some PR problems for the vaccine. And, it is still very, very early. And I think you're right. I think public confidence will increase as we see more people getting it without a problem. I think we're just in that really, that critical phase right now where, it's not available, and there's got to be a real campaign. I'm curious, did you talk to any CEOs about this idea? And I'm sure, being the intrepid reporter that you are, Andrew,
there's a very mixed view of what to do. I think that there's a view, if it was done in concert with others, that you might see it. Meaning, if the New York City Partnership, for example, which represents 100 of the biggest companies in New York, all decided that they were going to make this something that they wanted to do to try to rebuild confidence in New York and in the economy, that I think you could get people behind it. I think if everybody has to go one by one on their own, it's going to be interesting. I do think one of the airlines will try it. I'd be very surprised if they don't. In fact, the CEO, by the way, of Qantas in Australia, has said that it's something that he's considering and wants to do. By the way, when he said that publicly, there was, a massive backlash, as you'd imagine. So we'll see. I also, by the way, you mentioned the reports today about the two people who had an adverse reaction, and I don't know how adverse it is.
I think they had some kind of anaphylactic situation, and so Pfizer was talking about, if for people who are prone to allergic reactions, that they're starting to they're investigating the reactions. They didn't say how, as far as I know, they didn't say how severe they were.
I keep hearing in my reporting about how this vaccine is working, I talked to a surgeon who's part of one of these tests who, and I don't want to say this publicly almost because I want people to take the vaccine. I hope I want people to take the vaccine. And he said the second shot is so significant, was for him so significant, he had to cancel his 2 days worth of surgeries because he had a real fever. And he said that as hospitals right now, since the first line responders, the hospital folks are going to get this vaccine first, there's a real discussion about how to stagger the vaccinating everybody, because you don't want all of the ER doctors, for example, to be given the vaccine on the same day together. You might actually want to spread it out over 2, 3, 4 weeks, if not a month, to see A, how people are reacting, and B, to have enough people around if in fact that second shot, everybody seems to think the second shot is the harder shot.
Yeah, which is interesting because I guess the shots contain the same thing, right? It's not different. It's just the accumulated effect of vaccine. And, you know, whenever they say how many doses they have, you have to realize you have to cut that number in half for the number of people who will be able to be vaccinated with that current supply. Were you surprised when you read about the Trump administration and Pfizer and the fact that they didn't go to this conference in DC, and that the Trump administration, for whatever reason, didn't order enough of the Pfizer vaccine?
Well, so no, I've been following this like crazy. I did an interview with the CEO of Pfizer, I guess now two or 3 weeks ago. And if you remember, Pfizer made such a big deal out of trying to say that they were not part of Operation Warp Speed. And they really weren't, insofar as the government didn't buy their.
Right.
And I think that they were so upset internally, even among the employees, that they were being politicized, that the reason why Pfizer didn't go to this conference now, and same with Moderna too, though that is part of the Operation Warp Speed. Look, I would have taken as much of the drug or I would have bought as much of the drug as possible. I would have thought, having said that, I think that knowing that there's the Moderna, Pfizer, I think they had more hope about the AstraZeneca drug than, and maybe that was a mistake. We'll see. But J&J, I think they thought there was going to be so much coming on, and they had bought so much from so many different people. They were almost making like a venture capital bet. Right. Sort of like praying that one of these things worked. So I don't know. I mean, look, in retrospect, we'll always fault, you always fault what you wish could have happened, but we'll see.
Yeah. Listen, so let's just talk about sort of what's going on economically, because this is obviously your sweetest spot among many sweet spots. And Andrew, it's really a dire situation. Unemployment benefits are going to end for many people at the end of December. There's still not a stimulus package that's passed on Capitol Hill. I guess the latest offer is the White House offering. I can just, for people who haven't been following the news minute by minute, Washington, with the COVID stimulus bill, the White House offered Democrats a $916 billion pandemic stimulus proposal that would meet their demand to provide some relief to state and local governments and include liability protections for businesses. The offer includes a one-time payment of about $600 to Americans, but does not revive higher weekly unemployment benefits. So, I mean, you know financial situations like nobody else. I mean, is this going to be enough to help so many people who are struggling? It's just horrible.
I think it's not. I mean, it's clearly not going to be enough, and it's not going to come fast enough. And it is demonstrably horrible. I can't say anything. There's nothing good to say about it. It is a terrible situation, and I think that, again, and this goes back to the vaccine conversation, it sort of depends where you think the light at the end of the tunnel comes. But even if you told me it came in May or June, I think there's going to be so many businesses that will be genuinely put out of business, so many people who will be unemployed. Getting them back is going to be beyond difficult. And I don't understand. I mean, I understand, but I don't understand why Washington has been so broken about doing something about this. And I think that we really have to just step up and do it. And I'm surprised we are where we are. But I've been surprised about a lot of things.
I mean, would think that of all things that Democrats and Republicans would come together in this case with, this huge impact. So
So
many.
I
And
have, I do have one view of why it hasn't happened, and it's perverse, though. Perverse. I almost don't want to say it. Because the stock market, and this is sick, because the stock market is as high as it is today, and I mean, it's you know the numbers. I think that there's a like see no evil, hear no evil, and oh look over there, these stocks are doing so great. These supposedly smart investors must think that the world is just fine. And I think there's such a disconnect between appreciating that what those investors are thinking is that 12 or 18 months from now, the world will be fine. That's what the bet is. It has nothing to do with now. And this is even more perverse, that it's not that I want the stock market to go down. I really, really don't. But I've always thought that it's the crisis. It's when the market on television, when you can see it. It shouldn't be that the numbers do it. It actually should be the stories when you see a small business person or somebody out of work or these lines. I would think that the lines on TV where you see people who are food insecure trying to get food, that would do it. But in a very sick and twisted way, I think that Washington looks at those numbers, and I think if those numbers were not as high as they are today, and were, falling and falling, all of a sudden, all of these powerful, elite, privileged people would be calling up Washington saying, you have to do something.
do you think that the media's done a good enough job of telling those stories so that, the relentless pain and suffering is palpable for people on Capitol Hill? I feel like it's very strange. I feel like these stories, honestly, are just not getting enough attention.
So, but I agree with you, and I think part of it is what I call the elite problem, which is, I'm a beneficiary of the fact that I can do my job from home, right? You're able to do what you're doing from home. Some of the quote unquote richest and wealthiest, most powerful people in the world are doing just fine. They're not only doing just fine, they're doing better.
Well, yeah.
And so they're not, and by the way, money, I hate to say, talks in Washington. So all of the biggest donors in the country, they're not all calling up their senator and their congressman screaming, bloody murder, you have to fix this. Some of them are, by the way. There's some that I don't want to suggest that, all people who have had success, are somehow, immoral. I think that there are actually some who are very moral who are picking up the phone and are trying. But you're not having this sort of wave of phone calls, you have to do this and you have to do it right now.
You did something in the New York Times, a project called How to Fix America that ran in last Sunday's paper. And experts weighed in on one thing we should do right now. What was the best solution, or name the top 3 things that
the one that blew me away, and we actually talked to a cross section of people, scientists, doctors, educators, Jeffrey Canada, who's had great success in the Harlem. A lot of people had different ideas. The most unique idea was one actually that came from Bill Ackman, the hedge fund manager. And his idea was that if he wanted to create a program called Birthright, which is that every American, when you're born, the government would hand you $6,750, which would be put in the equivalent of a 401k plan. It would cost $26 billion annually. And at 65 years old, every American would be a millionaire. You wouldn't be able to take the money out. It actually was such a, to me, clever, I had never even thought about anything like it. It's sort of cheap. I mean, I know $26 billion sounds like a lot, but if you think about what that means on the other end later, the ability to create potentially financial literacy for Americans who would be all of a sudden engaged in that money, because even though they couldn't take it out, they might be able to move it between index funds or different things. So they might have to understand what's happening in a way that maybe they don't.
Mm-hmm.
That was the one where, and it was probably the one where we got the most feedback.
Why that particular, is that what it would take over the average lifespan or average span until retirement to 65. Is that why he came up with that number?
Yeah, $1,750 per kid at zero if you invested it. And I think he was assuming a 7 or 8% return over the course of your life. Most people don't have $6,750 in their bank account today.
Yeah.
So if you gave it to them on day one and you compound interest, I mean, this is sort of the Warren Buffett school of investing.
Right.
Maybe I have a bias towards financial ideas, but it was one that I just thought I never even conceived of it. I even thought of how you do that. And $26 billion, a lot of money to do it every year, but I think you'd save a fortune on the other end.
Were other people receptive to it? You talked to?
Oh goodness, we were getting emails and texts from people, staffers in Congress who wanted to know more about it. I think Bill got all sorts of it was I thought one of the more we were trying to find clever, not just interesting ideas, but something that was like really novel.
Right.
That seemed
pretty
novel.
Anything else that struck you?
It's something that actually has already started. I don't know if you're familiar, I think you must be, with Robert Smith, who's the wealthiest African in the country. He has this idea, what he calls the 2% solution, and he wrote about it, which is that if all businesses...
But for people listening, sorry, I don't want this to be too insidey. For people listening, why don't you explain who Robert Smith is and what he's done philanthropically? So
Robert Smith, former banker, became a private equity guy, is now the wealthiest African-American in the country. You may know him, or you would likely know him most because it was on television. He did a wonderful thing about 2 years ago at Morehouse College. He gave the commencement speech, and in the middle of the commencement speech, he told all of the students that he was going to pay for their student loans, that he was basically going to wipe the loans clean. And it was really a remarkable moment. The journalist in me also wants to tell you that about a month ago, he was also involved in a settlement with the Department of Justice and the IRS for tax fraud. And so I know there's lots of questions about Robert Smith, so I don't want to leave that on the table. But I feel like, in fairness, I should mention that. And in any event, he has this idea around public and private companies around the world taking 2% of the money that they keep in the bank and effectively putting it in Black communities around the country. And you already saw Netflix did something like this. And if you could just deposit that money, instead of depositing it at JP Morgan or Bank of America, you deposit it in the community bank, in a community that represents minorities and whatnot, that you can create, you effectively, they will have to loan out the money. And so it creates an opportunity in all these places. And it was a clever way to do it. And it wasn't pitched as philanthropy, which is what I thought was so interesting, because I think that there's philanthropy on one side, but a lot of these businesses are still, for better or worse, profit motivated. And so if you could do it and not either take away their profit or create more profit for them, it create an extra incentive. So
do well by doing good. So I wanted to ask you, because I don't want to take too much of your valuable time, Andrew Ross Sorkin, but let's talk about the Biden administration and some of the